want to welcome the about 700 people who are watching us, believe it or not, and introduce us to the topic of what we know about fall repopulation at 10:04 a.m. on 4/22/21. We have a very distinguished panel who all know everything there is to know, which is not everything, but it is everything there is to know about repopulation. We have with us our Vice Provost, Jody Cormack, who will be speaking to us about class and course repopulation. We have our great Dean of Students, Piya Bose, who will be talking to us about student repopulation. We've got our Associate Vice President for Human Relations, Nancy Torres, who will be talking to us about staff repopulation. Our Associate Vice President for Faculty Affairs, Kirsty Fleming, who will be talking to us about faculty repopulation. Our Director of Environmental Health and Safety, who's been keeping us safe all this time, George Alfaro. We have our Medical Director for CSULB Student Health Services, Dr. Kim Fodran, and last but not least, our Assistant Vice President for Administration and Finance, Mishelle Laws, who has been carrying a lot of the burden on her shoulders. So thank you all for what you've done during the interim, and thanks for appearing on this panel at this busy time of the semester. So as you know, we had a Qualtrics survey, some interesting results from that. Just some quick data points, just so that you know who the audience is, who we're speaking to. It's mostly staff, actually, about 2/3 staff, about 1/3 faculty. Most of the staff and faculty come from Academic Affairs, which, as we all know, is the biggest division on the campus, but also significant numbers from Student Affairs, from Administration and Finance, and a few from others. About half the people who responded to the survey have been working on campus either full-time or part-time through the epidemic, and about half have been completely off campus. And the three top issues, not surprisingly, were questions about staff repopulation, questions about classes and student repopulation, and then some questions about safety and about other things. Before we begin, I just want to emphasize that this webinar, which is the first of its kind, is co-sponsored by the Academic Senate of the University, and Dr. Pei Fang Hung, who is our Secretary of the Senate, is as one of the officers representing the Senate while other Senate officers are busy. In case you haven't met her, Dr. Hung is also the chair of the Speech and Language Pathology Department. Okay, so I think we'll kick off with a focus on class and course repopulation. And so, Jody, I know that you have, this is how it's going to work for all the speakers, by the way. What we've done is we've done our homework before we've come to this webinar. We collected all the questions and divided them into either those that are related to class repopulation, those went to Jody, staff repopulation, those went to Nancy, health ones, and so on. So we divided them. So Jody, you get the task of speaking in about 5 minutes about the current plans for class and course repopulation. So the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you so much, Brian. So I think a lot of questions were around course repopulation. How did we decide which courses to bring back? How did we decide how we were going to schedule? So let me go through that a little bit. I think there were two primary things that we considered in terms of course repopulation. Number one was safety, and number two was pedagogy. So we worked in parallel as we are considering each of those. So if you know, we went really for the primary 2021 academic year with only about 3% of our courses on campus. And those were courses that really could be taught in no other way and would affect students' graduation if they weren't offered. primarily lab activity courses that could be done safely. So those are the courses that have been on campus for the past year. We went to the deans and associate deans, asked them to go to their chairs and faculty and talk about what courses pedagogically really are better taught face-to-face and should be brought back if we can. And so we kind of asked them to prioritize, and we really left that up to each college who may prioritize those courses a little differently. And so we asked them to give us those courses. We never set a target for the number of courses we would have on campus. We looked at what they thought was most important to bring back pedagogically. So we did that, and in looking at those courses, then we needed to look at safety. And it's very difficult to start planning for repopulation when we don't know what the rules will be. So as you know, we start planning really in the very beginning of the spring semester, which was really right in the middle of a huge outbreak. And things were shutting down and things were worse than they'd ever been, but we need to plan for what things are going to look like next August. And so at that time, we're in the position of looking at, well, we think things will get better. The vaccinations had just come out. We think we'll be a more vaccinated population. We think there's going to be some opportunity for us to have perhaps less or no social distancing, perhaps still needing to wear face masks. It really is a crystal ball kind of situation. So what we did is we looked at where we are, which is currently at 6 feet social distancing, but we planned for no social distancing, but a 50% room capacity. So if you're following the news, most of what the news says is, well, now we're at 75%, now we're at 50%. Hopefully soon we'll get to 25%. But what they don't say is with 6 foot social distancing. That's our Cal OSHA requirement, that's our public health requirement. And our campus has somewhat smaller rooms. So as you look at that 6 foot social distancing, that can really affect what we can do in a class. So we're looking at, by August, perhaps having the ability to have no social distancing. If we still have a social distancing requirement, that's what we will do. We will be safe. We will maintain the safety and health guidelines that are set forward by public health. When we looked at scheduling that way, we were able to schedule about 45% of our classes on campus. And that includes some activity classes that we weren't able to do before, some lectures, some seminars. So a wider variety really based on the priorities set by each of the colleges for their programs and for their students. So that's kind of how we ended up where we are. Obviously, we'll need to look at this as summer moves on. Make sure that we can safely set aside the space that we need in our rooms to keep everyone where they need to be. And that's where we'll be.
Fabulous. Thank you, Jody, for that excellent summary. And if I take the time to say thank you, Jody, for your incredible work on bringing the more than 100,000 sections of classes to what we think is the optimum for what we know now. So a great job, thank you. All right, well, of course, students are the main focus of our university. That's why we're all here. And so our Dean of Students will now give the same kind of response to the questions that were raised by everyone in the Qualtrics survey about student repopulation. So Piya, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Provost Jersky. So as the number of face-to-face courses increases, obviously we'll continue to have students, more students on campus. So a common question we're receiving is, what policies are in place for student health and safety, and what are the procedures for folks to follow up on? So there are 3 main policies that all students have to follow when coming to campus. The first is the completion of the daily COVID screening. The second is maintaining 6 foot social distancing. And the third is wearing a face covering at all time. If you ever come across a student that's not in compliance with these 3, the Office of Student Conduct and Ethical Development has specifically created a form where any of these alleged policy violations can be reported, and that team in office will follow up. I do want to share that through fall 2020 and spring 2021, we haven't been having any concerns or issues with our students being in compliance with these policies. Our students have been very respectful of the policies and are following all of the steps that are needed. Additionally, we've hired a group of student assistants that we've titled Health Ambassadors. This group of students walk around the campus during business hours, and they do a few things. One is they make sure that everyone that's on campus is following our policies for health and safety. Second, if there are any concerns that are occurring, they're informing us and documenting everything. And lastly, we like to reward positive behavior. So they're handing out Long Beach swag and goodies to all of our students that are, following all of our policies and making safe and healthy decisions. Some of the other things that I've been getting asked about from a lot of students are we, do we have to follow policies? Do we have to take in-person classes? What if we're concerned? So we've been talking to students, if students aren't feeling safe to return to campus immediately, we're encouraging students to work with their advisors to find a solution for schedules that allows them to remain remote. Again, since we have so many courses that are continuing to remain virtual, this is a possibility for students who have some of those concerns. And we have a group of students that are super excited to return to campus and start to return to some sense of normalcy. So they are excited. I think as Jody shared, we're going to continue to do everything gradually, and our students are on board with ensuring safe and healthy practices.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Piya. It's good to know and not a surprise that our students are pulling their weight and doing what's right. And great to know that positive reinforcement is our main topic, our main effort here. So thank you for that. And now we have our revered AVP for HR, Nancy Torres, who will speak to us about the many questions that staff have had about repopulation. And this is, may I say, one of the most difficult topics and in many ways, the least amount of information is available for this. But Nancy will tell you all and share with all of us what we do know and what we can share. So Nancy, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Provost Jersky. Revered, I'm not sure that I've ever had an opening like that before. So thank you for this opportunity. We understand that we need to get more information out about our staff plan. It has taken an enormous amount of time to pull it together, to gather all the constituents that needed to be gathered in order to understand how we repopulate. And let me just give you some background. Since about March of 2020, there's been a group of us, and many of the faces that you see on your screen have been meeting on a regular basis, initially as part of a COVID crisis team, and then recently we converted to being a campus repopulation team. We are very dependent on the guidance from Dr. Fodran and George Alfaro about what we can do. And as Jody said, our driving focus has been to make sure that we have the campus health and safety and the service to the students as the forefront of what we do and how we plan. So as part of this repopulation committee, we created a subcommittee to get input from staff. And we had a number of listening sessions. We held listening sessions specifically with staff and other parts of the campus. We heard the voices at staff council, a number of conversations that we've had with our union reps. And then of course, through the conversations that we've all had individually with the people we run into, and took all of that into consideration as we created these guidelines. The things that came through very clear in those conversations was people wanted to make sure that we were keeping their safety and their morale at the forefront, that we were taking a look at the space and were we able to provide them a safe workspace in which to work. What were the things, and we got some feedback about things that we needed to do with our management team and how our management team was functioning within a remote environment. What are the policies that we needed to take a look at? What was it going to cost us to make all of this happen, to be able to provide a safe work environment for you? And then we also didn't want to lose sight of the things that we learned through repopulation. And I think all of our departments have seen a change in process and a change in process for the better as a result of this remote environment we were thrown into totally unexpectedly. So we use that as a bit of a framework to build the guidelines that we are sharing with our management team about how they repopulate. And I know that many folks are expecting to hear that we are going to have one particular approach to the way we repopulate. Well, that's just not possible. I'm going to tell you that right now. Each area is going to be unique. Each area delivers different services and has different processes and has different customers, and all of that needs to be taken into consideration into how we repopulate. Again, our guideposts are the health and safety of folks, making sure that we are continuing to provide services to our students. So we are asking our managers to take into consideration what are the services that they are currently providing to their customers, students, other faculty, staff, external customers, and how is it they can address this as we repopulate? What needs to happen? We know that the Chancellor's Office is expecting the campuses to repopulate. We are, to what degree has not been said, but there's an expectation that people will come back to campus. Our students will come back to campus, our faculty will come back to campus, our staff will come back to campus in one form or another. And so we are wanting to make sure that we are aligned with that guidance that we are receiving from the CL. We also know that we need to take a look at what have been the pain points. We're asking our managers, what are the pain points that you've experienced while your team has been working remote? We've had some wins, but we also have had some losses. And so what is it that we can do to reconfigure how it is to overcome those pain points? And so, so those are things that, again, we're asking your managers and the managers on this call to take into consideration as they build their plan. Each plan is going to be unique to their area, and my department is a very good example of that. I have staff human resources, which has been functioning remotely since, for the most part, since last March. But the payroll and benefits folks have been here almost every day. That is why they've made sure that we continue to get paid, and their job is much more difficult working remotely. And so we found that it was best, until we find better processes, that they continue to work on campus. And then I have a small IT team that has been 100% remote and will be less remote as we come back. So within my own area, they're all going to look different. And that's what I expect we will see across the campus, and maybe within your own work units. Your own work units may look like mine. One area is here all the time. One area is here more remotely, and people are on a rotational basis, and some areas may be even more remote. It just depends. It is not the same for everyone, and we are expecting your managers to work with you to figure out what is the best approach. Now, we are also asking your managers, before they start bringing folks on campus, to make sure that they've done a walkthrough with environmental health and safety in George, to ensure that the work area is safe for you to come back. And for those of you that haven't been on campus, you should know there is thousands and thousands of dollars of plexiglass and signage and 6-foot distance markers in areas where people would typically line up. So there have been a lot of things that have been built into the infrastructure to make sure that we are safe. And I don't want to steal any of George's thunder, because I'm sure he's going to touch on that. But we're asking your managers that before they start bringing folks back on campus, is the work area safe? Do you have enough distance between, if everyone was on campus, if your entire staff was back in the way they left in last March of 20, do you have enough space between their work areas? If not, then we need to find a different solution, whether it's relocating folks or remote working or rotational schedules. But let's take a look at that. And that's what we're asking our managers to do before they bring people back on campus. There's also a requirement that you participate in some training before you come on campus. So we want to make sure that your managers are ensuring that you're participating in that training so that you know what's expected of you when you're back on campus. We know that there are lots of folks that have family care issues. And so we want to make sure that our managers are working with them through those issues. We know that we have people with medical conditions and other concerns. We want to make sure that we are taking care of those things, that we're listening to those things. For folks that are having medical issues for themselves, and they believe that they will need some kind of accommodation, we'll need to know that early because it takes some time. We'll want to take a look. We will put you through the interactive process through the Office of Equity and Diversity, which will require a doctor's note. It will require the staff, the managers, and participation, and often their union reps participation to figure out what's the right solution. But that's a 2 to 3 week process. We are asking your managers and the managers on this call to give their staff enough notice. Lives have changed since we've been working remote. You manage your day differently since you've been working remotely. And so we know that you need some time to adjust, come back. And so we are asking your managers to give you enough time. Staff HR has already got a template that is we will make available once we talk to your managers and we understand what kinds of schedules they foresee for your areas and how that will impact each of the individuals. We also want to make sure that we're not violating any of the language in any of our collective bargaining agreements. And so that's why we're asking managers to involve staff HR early in the process so we can help folks through that and give people the time that they need in order to come back to campus. The timing of repopulation is truly up to your manager. Some areas in preparation for the fall come back earlier. Some areas come back later. Some areas aren't impacted at all by the start of the fall semester. Their busy seasons are in different times through the course of the year. I don't know that. You all have the expertise in each of your areas to know that. That's why we've hired your managers to lead the areas that they're leading. It's because they have that knowledge and that expertise. So timing will look different. The format will look different. It is not going to all look the same, but our guiding posts again are the health and safety of our staff, the service to our students, our willingness and our need to listen when you have some concerns about coming back to campus. We want to make sure that we understand that and that we address that if there's an accommodation that needs to happen, whether it be through Office of Equity and Diversity or through any of the many leaves that have rolled out through the start of COVID. And I can tell you, it's been an alphabet soup. It's been hard to keep track of what leaves are currently in place, how much time you have, when they expire, who's eligible, the eligibility rules. It has just been a whirlwind of leaves. So we ask that you work very closely with the staff HR team and your ASM so that we can figure out whether there's an appropriate leave for you and your circumstance. I noticed that in the questions that I got, there was questions about vaccinations and are we going to require vaccinations and what are we going to do with people that don't want to get vaccinated and all of that fun stuff. At this time, we are waiting for direction from the Chancellor's office. You are not alone on those questions. I think everyone on this panel has those questions. Everyone across the system has those questions. And so we are waiting for guidance from the Chancellor's office about how we will approach that. Again, ultimately, it is about your safety and well-being and what we know from medical knowledge. And that is Dr. Fodran's area of expertise and not mine. And I'm sure she will speak to that a little bit later. And then the next set of questions was really around telecommuting. And we were able to put together a rushed telecommuting policy, somewhat rushed, because there are a number of campuses across the system that prior to COVID had telecommuting policies. And we had already been collecting them. We knew it was an area that we needed to address. We came in loud and clear. We heard it loud and clear through Beach 2030. And so we had already begun the work of putting together a telecommuting policy that we could meet and confer with the unions over. So when we were very quickly required to put together a telecommuting policy to address COVID, we took a look at all of the policies that have already been agreed to by the unions at the different campuses and took the language from those policies. We wanted to be as make it look as familiar as possible to the union. So it wasn't new language. It was language that had already been tried and tested. So we knew that it worked. And that is what we put together in our temporary telecommuting policy. Now, based on the agreement we have with the unions, we have this policy through the end of the pandemic. And it looks like we're getting close to the end of the pandemic, and I don't want to jinx it, and I hope that I haven't. But we will be ready to sit down and meet and confer when we have a stable environment. Right now, we don't know what our world is going to look like October or November. Again, what we expect in the long-term telecommuting policy that we hope to meet and confer, or that we will be meeting conferring over, is it won't look significantly different than the policy that you have today. But we do want to learn from all of you what worked and what didn't work, so that we understand what pieces we should add or exclude from our plan. I don't know what the unions are going to come share across the table from their perspective, but I need to be ready for that. We want to take the opportunity to talk to the other campuses to find out where their pitfalls are, what would they have done differently, so that we're building a model and hopefully best in class telecommuting policy when we sit down at the table. That is ultimately our goal. And I think that you all know, now that you've had the experience of working remotely, that working remotely and managing remotely is very different than being here face to face. There's different kinds of challenges. Some people have been more productive. Some people have been less productive. And then we've got a whole bunch of folks in between. Ultimately, our goal, with whether you're on campus or off campus, is that we want you to be as successful as possible. So how do we make sure that we are building into our telecommuting policies that we are ensuring that you are being as successful as possible, that our managers are being as successful as possible in managing a team that's remote? Again, it takes a different set of tools to do that. And so there is a lot of work to be done through that. I know there's a telecommuting policy in our future, and I am very appreciative for the unions that they gave us this opportunity to put together this short-term plan to address the COVID a crisis that we have been living in for the last year and a half. So I hope that answers some of your questions. I think that George is going to speak to some of the issues that you raised through the questions that I saw around what we're doing to ensure that your workspace is safe. Dr. Fodran can speak to what are the issues and from her expertise. What are we doing from a campus, and how are we being vigilant to make sure that our employees stay healthy? So I think I've answered everything. I hope that I have answered everything, and just let me know if there is anything else I should address.
Great. Well, Nancy, I think we can understand why I called you revered, because you did an amazing job at answering a huge number of questions with what we know right now.
Sure.
And I hope everyone is getting the picture that 100% certainty is not available in this life, and especially not in the middle of this pandemic. So we, like you, are working with incomplete information, and the aim of this webinar is to share what we know with you at this time. By the way, for those questions that we didn't quite get to or didn't answer, we'll be developing an FAQ with specific written answers that'll appear later. So don't worry if your particular question didn't get answered. But now to another group of key importance. Obviously, the faculty of this university had some questions specifically for them. And we call on our AVP for Faculty Affairs, Kirsty Fleming, to address some of the key ones. And just again, reminder, we will address the ones that Kirsty can't do in 5 minutes later on. So Kirsty, the floor is yours.
So welcome everyone. And I actually think I can, because really there was, even though there were a number of questions, it really kind of condensed down into one question. And so, you know, faculty members' work falls in 3 areas: teaching, scholarship, and service. The questions tend to be around the teaching component. So that's really what I'm going to talk about. And they come in various phrases about, will I be able to teach on campus? Do I have to teach on campus, right? It's all about how does their teaching assignment work is the main question that comes through. So, you know, in some ways, the answer is the process has not changed, right? So Jody described how what I call the schedule was developed, right? So the department chairs determine which classes to offer, and they should be doing that based on programmatic and student needs. There's help and support of the Dean's office in doing that, usually through an associate dean. And they also determine the mode of delivery. So the mode of delivery has to be an approved mode. It could be face-to-face, it could be hybrid, or it could be online, right? And we've had this extra layer for the last few semesters that Jody talked about, which is to ensure that everybody's safe. There had to be coordination at the institutional level, right? Because we had to make sure that George's group could make the buildings ready and keep them clean and safe, right? We had to make sure there weren't too many people in the same space, right? So there's been this extra layer of coordinating that Jody described. Okay, then how do assignments work? Well, assignments work in the same way as they always have in some senses, right? The chair makes the teaching assignments. There is an order of assignment in the collective bargaining agreement that says which groups you assign courses to first, and it lays out group by group how the assignments go. Obviously, within a group, you're looking at the qualifications and expertise and experience of the individuals in that group. So all of that is still true, right? That's how it's going to work. Most department chairs, and I think this was true when I was a chair, will ask faculty members, what's your preference, right? Which courses do you want to teach? What are your preferred days and times? Maybe now there's an additional component. What is your preferred mode of delivery? But faculty preferences, most chairs, I think, will try and accommodate those preferences, but preferences are not the overriding factor, right? It is programmatic and student need. So most chairs and associate deans will try and work with faculty around their preferences, but as I say, that's not the determining factor. Okay, so what's different? I mean, I think what's different here is you know, clearly how we feel about being on campus, right? There are some people really want to come back to campus. They really want to be face-to-face with their students. Other people are really concerned about it. And let me reiterate what's been said before. Everything that's being done is being done with an eye to safety and to comply with the safety guidelines. That's a constant in this. So, and Nancy addressed this for staff, and it's the same for faculty members. If someone is unsafe, then there are a couple of options they can look at. One is to come to my office, Faculty Affairs, and we can look at the available leave options, which, as Nancy mentioned, is an alphabet soup and is an ever-changing alphabet soup. And the other thing is that people can request an accommodation through the Office of Equity and Diversity, right? So it's important, you know, if you feel that you have a reason that you're unsafe, there are options that you can look at. Now, ultimately, the decision about whether you get an accommodation will be based on whether you are unsafe, right? So do you have, for example, a medical condition that might mean that even with all the safety precautions that everyone's taking, you would be unsafe? Then there'll be accommodations. It could be working remotely. It might be that your work environment is configured in ways to keep you safe, you know, through plexiglass screening and your office space. So there are some options for people to explore if there's a safety concern based on for example, a medical condition. And then I will just sort of say a couple of other things. A lot of things that faculty members have been concerned about isn't so much repopulation, it's the impact of the pandemic on their work. It has affected faculty work, right? Teaching is different. Many people have not been able to pursue their scholarship in the way that they would normally, and the service opportunities have changed. And we're doing a lot, and we're in a lot of conversations to try and make sure that faculty's career progression is not affected by what was beyond their control as a result of the pandemic. So the provost, the deans, the chairs, we're all working really hard to try and what I call pandemic mitigation. So that's a concern that's expressed a lot. People are concerned about their career progression, and that's very much on our radar.
Excellent. Thank you, Kirsty. Again, a great summary of complex series of questions, but thank you for picking out the top three. And as I said, if there are other specific questions, we'll address them either in the questions and answers if we can, or later on in writing. So thanks very much, and wonderful to see how all the faculty, all the staff, and all the students have managed so incredibly well through this difficult time. Next, perhaps the man of the moment, George Alfaro, our Health and Safety Director. George, you got quite a lot of specific questions about safety, and so tell us the sort of your top three that you extracted from the survey. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Provost Jersky. Thanks, everyone. So I was able to get the questions. I grouped them into kind of two categories. Number one, how do we keep staff who are on campus working safely, who may be dealing with the public? And then the other group was, how do we keep staff who are working on campus who may be working in cubicles safe from one another? How do we keep them safe from each other? So let me take the first question regarding working with the public. So how do we keep staff who are on campus safe when they come across the public? There's a lot of tools that we can use to address this, right? So the first thing I start with is our campus questionnaire. Great tool, and it's our first stop, right? It's our first access point where we look at the history, the medical, what's happening with on the day of the person before they come to campus. If they are approved to come on campus or if they are denied to come on campus, that's the first layer that we see. We can start limiting people who we do not want on campus, right? People who are showing symptoms, people who are sick. That, along with the training, kind of for our staff, kind of helps them understand how to deal with campus and the public and that nature. Our next layer, I think, in that regard, would be actually looking at the work site, right? Looking at the assessments of the work site, the areas. We do this, as people mentioned, I'm walking with administrative services managers, I'm walking with facility coordinators, I'm walking with department safety coordinators, I'm walking with a group of people, and my goal is to walk at every space right on campus. Put eyes on every space. We're walking through the spaces, and we're walking through these locations, through these areas. Our goal is to identify these locations where people may congregate, right, where the public will be coming in, and address this from a safety standpoint, right? How do we limit them at the door? Do we have to go to a reservation system instead of a walk-in system? That's goal number one. The second item we'll look at is, how do we keep them? How do we slow them down if they are in reservation system, right? So with that, we're using floor decals to kind of limit and kind of showing people where to stand. So kind of forcing them at the 6-foot distancing. And then our third step, as been mentioned, is using plexiglass barriers, right? Using barriers when I have to have a counter where people, the public, have to come up. When we'll put a barrier in there to make sure there is a distinction between the public and the staff working. So that's kind of what we're looking at as far as the work site. What else are we doing to kind of ensure the safety when dealing with the public? Frequent disinfection comes into play, right? We're disinfecting these spaces 3, 4, 5 times a day. And what are we disinfecting? High touch areas, the spaces where the public will touch, right? The door handles, the elevator buttons, the countertops, anything that people will touch. We have our custodial crew during the day, that's their only task, is doing disinfection of these spaces. So they'll go walk around, they'll do disinfection of high touch areas throughout maybe 1 building or 2 buildings that we have assigned to them. And then once they do that, finish that, they'll come back and start that process again. Our goal is to hit these spots 2 to 3 times a day. What we're seeing is our custodians are hitting it 3, 4, 5 times a day. So we're doing active, frequent disinfection of these areas. In addition to that, we have disinfection totes that we're dispersing through a lot of these departments, a lot of suites. And in these totes, I have quite a bit of supplies to help when we're dealing with the public. We're talking about wipes, to wipe down areas before and after. Gloves, if you're handling documents to the public, we have disposable gloves to offer. Face shield, right? If I'm speaking with the public and I'm a little concerned, I have my face covering on, but we'll also provide you a face shield to make sure that all precautions are taken in that regard. And as we mentioned, masks. Right? We have disposable masks that we offer in a tote, and we even have cloth masks that we offer in the tote in case someone forgets. The public, I forgot mine in the car, or whatever the excuse may be. There is one to offer them, so we can kind of make sure they're in compliance right away. So that's the totes. And then to go along with that, mask usage obviously is a big key, right? Stemming the pollutant at its source. For me, and from a safety standpoint, is cutting off at the source, which means wearing the mask limits the amount of droplets that get expelled into the air. That minimizes the chance of exposure. And vaccination is another tool that we have. I mean, using all these tools, I feel confident that we have everything in place, so you do, when the time comes to deal with the public and be safe. So let me look at the other standpoint, the other question as far as working with staff, right? And we have a lot of areas. We have a lot of cubicles there, a lot of cube farms, a lot of departments where we have a lot of staff in a tight area. So what are we doing with those, areas and those spaces in regard to safety? So early on, we developed what I call a building campus repopulation guideline. We developed a campus repopulation guideline that we put out, and this kind of was made for managers and directors to kind of take into consideration everything, to think about everything as they start planning to welcome people back, to welcome staff back. How do I prepare my area to welcome staff into my workspace, right? So that has everything to do as far as things you can do as far as kitchens and break rooms, as far as separating equipment. What do we do in front office, locations, talks about reservation system, talks about what we're doing for restrooms. It kind of has everything in one guideline. So supervisors can go through that and really get an idea and understanding of what we're expecting the environment to look like from a safety perspective. Along the lines of that, we also developed a supervisor checklist. This checklist is kind of not designed for the area, but more designed for the supervisor for working with staff, right? So the guidelines for the campus is kind of guidelines set so we can look at that area, make sure that area is taken care of. The supervisor checklist is designed to make sure that each staff member is taken care of from a personal standpoint, as far as training is the training being conducted? Do we have access to the questionnaires? Is everything in space at 6 feet? All the kind of questions that supervisors can check off in a yes and no, and kind of to trigger things as far as how the stage needs to be set for staff. So those are 2 documents we put out there so they can understand, so managers and directors can understand, how do we set up a stay, how do we set up a workstation, and how do we make sure that the staff coming back are prepared to come back. In addition to that, as I mentioned, on walking spaces, we're walking locations, and when we're walking these locations, we're making sure that physical distancing is adhered to, whether it's cubicles, right, whether it's desks. We're making sure that they're distanced at least 6 feet. In some places, they're not distanced 6 feet. So what are we doing in that regard? We're making a note of it, and we're kind of working with the directors to whether add a rotation to the schedule to make sure that no one is there sitting close within 6 feet at the same time. Or maybe it's redesigning the work area, right? Redesign some desks, moving people around. Instead of sitting next to this person, there's an empty desk in that corner. We're going to move this person to that corner. So we have the 6 foot distancing. So we were looking at that. We're assessing all these areas and making sure that everyone, when the time comes to come back, that area has been assessed, signage has been put up, everything is set and in place before staff comes back. So we're not trying to figure this out the last minute. Everything's been thought of, and we have a process that's in place. So that's kind of what we've been looking at.
Great. Well, thank you, George. It is a huge amount of work, and thank you to BBS and all the incredible janitorial staff who have been on campus every day, cleaning in accordance with public health guidelines and making sure that the campus is safe. It is often the case that those workers are not thanked. So I'd like to, on behalf of the campus, reach out and say thank you on behalf of all of us for keeping us safe. We appreciate your work and thank you. And that is a very important task. All right, well, medical information. Certainly this Dr. Fodran and her whole team have been instrumental in guiding Long Beach State through this incredibly difficult, once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. And she has lots of information to share with you all who have asked questions about that aspect of the pandemic and repopulation. So, Dr. Fodran, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you so much, Provost Jersky. So the majority of my questions were centered around the vaccine, and I think Provost Jersky and Nancy made it really easy on me because you already answered the question. So no, vaccines will not be required at this point to come to campus with the exception of our housing students. So they are the only group at this point that will be required to be vaccinated come fall. However, I would strongly encourage all of you or all of us to please get vaccinated as soon as possible. It helps protect you and all of those around you. I know there's been a lot of press and media about the vaccines. I know the Johnson & Johnson vaccine is being looked at. But overall, the vaccines are amazingly effective. Breakthrough cases can occur, but are exceedingly rare. Over the 77 million doses given, there's been upwards of maybe 5,000 breakthrough cases based on current data. About 1 in 10,000 who are vaccinated will receive a breakthrough infection or contract COVID. And of those, less than 1 in a million have passed away. So if you contrast that to if you contract COVID, your risk of death is 1 in 56. So those are really, really good odds in your favor. So the other question that I got was around variants and what can we do about variants? So variants, the best way to combat those is to try and push down transmission. So the more virus we have circulating, the more hosts it can find, and the more that the virus can mutate. So it's all those really basic public health measures that everyone's been mentioning. They work and they're quite powerful. So the masking, the social distancing, and getting vaccinated as soon as you can. There's been some recent data released by LA County Public Health where they found that cases in TK through 12 among staff were not associated with the students at the school. So it's a good thing to know. We could perhaps, apply that and extrapolate that to here on campus, and it should be reassuring to us. So all those things, masks and distancing, will keep you safe. So that's about all I have.
Okay, well, very complicated questions, but thank you for answering them so succinctly and effectively, Dr. Fodran. We appreciate that. I think we are doing our very best to answer the questions and answers which are coming from you. So thank you everyone for sending your questions. Those that we don't get to, as I said, we will certainly answer after the webinar. And I also want to point out that we have a very extensive website. Again, thank you for your suggestions. We will add to it if we can, and certainly share information that has been asked by you and by others in the survey. Before we end, I just thought it would be a good idea to hear about campus logistics. And so our last speaker, Mishelle Laws, knows all about those things and will answer some of your key questions, including the big one about what's open on campus and where can I eat, which is on my mind now, actually. So Mishelle.
Thank you, Provost Jersky. Yes, I'm going to talk about what is open and closed and address the top two questions that I always get: food and parking, among other things. So let's start with food. Currently, the Outpost and Parkside Dining are open on campus. We do not have any convenience stores open, but we do have beverages and snacks in the bookstore. For the fall, we anticipate all the vendors in the USU being open. Other campus food will have the Nugget open, the Outpost, most of the convenience stores in the fall. The UPD, the dining hall will be closed. Residential dining, we anticipate will be fully open, but it depends on the capacity of the residence halls. And we do anticipate having a coffee house in the library. That's always a campus favorite. The rec center is now open to students in a limited capacity, appointment only, but we are starting to open up some of the recreation activities. The library is currently closed to visitors, but we anticipate in the fall that it will be open, including the computer lab. The USU is currently open, including a computer lab, although room access is limited. And we hope to increase or open more rooms in the fall in the USU. For childcare, Isabel Patterson is open in limited capacity. We hope to increase the capacity in fall. And FCS is supposed to open this week. And again, hoping to increase capacity in the fall, depending on the safety guidelines. Resident halls, we're anticipating 90% availability. We need to hold some rooms in case of isolation, but we're anticipating 90% on the residence halls. Athletics, currently basketball, softball, and track have a few more home competitions. Competitions here. So our athletic facilities, those 3 athletic facilities will be open in this semester. So that's the baseball field, Blair Field, the softball field, and track. The spectators are extremely limited. Those 3, it's around 15%. And there's a whole bunch of safety guidelines that we have to comply with, including who the spectators are. So it's mostly campus constituents. The other sports are either in playoffs or that are away from campus or just practicing. And we anticipate in the fall that competitions will be happening for sports, and the spectators, we have to wait and see what the guidelines are at that time. Parking. So enforcement is active on campus. You can buy parking permits, both monthly or semester permits online, and you can buy daily permits at the machines. We do not anticipate having any other type of permit, such as a hybrid permit or limited parking permits. It will still be those 3 in the fall. Events, there's currently no events on campus for this summer. We are anticipating very limited events, primarily focused on our students or public good type events. So we've formed a small committee consisting of representatives from each division and George and Kim and the safety and medical advisors. And that committee is reviewing on a case-by-case event request for the summer. As I mentioned, it's limited to our students and public good type of activities. So far, we have very few events happening this summer that we've approved. They consist primarily of a couple athletic camps for the surrounding community, and then a few outreach activities of our own students, several incoming student activities focused around the residence halls. We are not making any decisions yet on fall events. We anticipate that we'll be able to widen the types of events that we have, the number of people that we have I say we anticipate, we hope, but we're not going to make a decision on that until mid-July to try to get as much current information as possible. And then around mid-July, we will communicate what the current requirements are around events, and we will most likely have that committee in place for fall events as an approval process that would recommend to the exec team what type of events or what specific events happen on campus. So that's what to expect when you come back to campus, both now and in the fall.
That's great, Mishelle. Thanks for that great information. And I know that George Alfaro just wanted to answer live a quick question about the guidelines list that he referred to. And so, George, you have a few seconds. And unmute.
Sure, thank you. So I think the question come in as far as the two documents I spoke about. So we have the campus repopulation guideline and the supervisor's checklist. So what I'll do is I'll send them out to the group, and maybe we can send it out to the campus or post them on the website, whatever would be easier. I believe one of them is already on our One Beach website, but I'll find out and we'll definitely send them out.
Terrific. Thanks, George. And we currently have almost 600 participants and 43 questions, so we're falling behind, but as guaranteed, we will answer those questions either in writing or on the website. And just to end, because it's 10:57 and everyone needs to get back to work, I just wanted to highlight some of the things that we asked about when we asked all of you what you're most excited about when returning to campus. And people actually wrote 2.5 pages of how excited they were. But I picked the top 3 that sort of resonated with me, and I hope it resonates with you as well. So number 1, the positive emotional nature of seeing and talking with people in person. And I can tell you, for me, that has just been a joy to see people in the flesh who I've seen only in our little rectangles in Zoom for a year. It's really wonderful. So it's exciting indeed. Second thing, and this is part of our mission and our values, not losing the students who are rethinking college. We're kind of saying, come back, we're here for you as we always have been through the pandemic, and we're here for you as we can be when we come back in fall. So that's number 2. And then number 3, which resonated for me, is having an area to work comfortably. As you can see, I'm back in my office, and boy, it's a wonderful office compared to the table in my kitchen where I've been working for the last year. We all make do, but it's really great to be back on campus. And so there are many, many other things. But thank you very much, all of you, for taking the time to attend. We really appreciate all of you and your work and your efforts, your huge efforts to keep the campus going and moving forward. Just so that you know, we are continuing to graduate students, to educate students, to keep our employees safe. And it's thanks to the efforts of you and all our colleagues who've made it possible. So thank you. And thank you to the Academic Senate for co-sponsoring our event. And thank you especially to our panelists who've done an amazing job in conveying a tremendous amount of information in just 1 hour. And if necessary, we will have more of these. So in the meantime, take care, everyone. Look after yourselves and your families and friends, and go beach.